issues of care have come up a lot. And I think it's great that we're looking a lot at the ethics of care and research, but there's a whole body of research looking at unpaid care, labor, the intersections between productive and reproductive spheres. In many of our contexts, there's a lot of drudgery around care and the silencing of women's interests around care. Most of the care work is done by women in many of the villages and areas we've lived with. So I guess, how does that also result in subordinate positions, creating a vicious cycle of asymmetric gender relations? I think it's worth paying attention to that. I have issues with care, so it's not just whether you're a mom or not. So I think, there's this thing about the glorification of it.
It becomes the celebration of motherhood, care, femininity, with which some of us, we have difficulties identifying with that, although we also realize care is important as a critique of science and as a prefiguration, as a new idiom to talk about the work that we do, a nice alternative to or idioms of competition, greed, and individualism.
For me, compassion embodies both empathy but also disconnection. Compassion requires you to let go. It gives space for people to be on their own path. Whereas caring for me can feel very oppressive. It's either an obligation I have or some kind of obligation I have to others after they have cared for me. It's a very unempowered place to be for me. And I feel like, let's think about other ways to talk about this femininity of caring, which to me just takes us back to the 1950s.
I therefore situate an ethic of care within both socially constructed and material gender dynamics of caring narratives and practices, and aim to attend to the often silenced moralities that they entail. Work in feminist political ecology addresses these silenced moralities through its careful attention to how gender and ecologies are co-constituted, both symbolically and materially. By articulating the social construction of gender and ecology, feminist political ecology challenges ecofeminist ideas that often position women as closer to nature, and that in reproducing binaries of feminine and masculine, productive and reproductive, can contribute to further devaluing or othering caring practices.
Care for life, which was both celebrated but also criticized as too essentialist. And my addition to that would be that care can inform our environmentalisms, our environmental politics. So I think in two ways. So care inside social environmental justice movements, right? So who does this work of maintaining the everyday kind of mundane labor of maintaining life in a movement, and how is this valued and who performs that kind of work? What would it mean to care with nature, right? So what kind of different types of perhaps even theories around power would that bring about? Third, if we can see contradictive or conflicting aspects of care when looking at the practice of let's say commoning projects, how does care for family might contradict care for movement, or care for community, care for marginalized others?
On how do gender and care play into FPA, and do they need to? From the realization on how difficult it is to translate care into my language, since I don't find the idea of care here and there are quite similar. So unpacking the ideas of care in other culture might come up surprising to the concept of care. And maybe this is also in line in the attempt to decolonize and co-production of knowledge.
I still unpacking the idea of care. We have word of peduli in Indonesian, but it's really narrow. I think we need to find another language that in Indonesia that can support care peduli with nurture, for example. I find that like merawat, for example, nurturing, it's also thinking about that. Care also have limitation. Sometimes you feel that your help or your care, but it's not. sometimes it's too much.
The concept of care actually comes from, and I sort of always recall and relate this to a very ontological and sort of action-oriented concern. It's for me, care is just a frame of ontology, and it's one of the ways in which action and ontology can be expressed.
But what does care stand for? And then, of course, you can unpack it, and it stands for many, many things. The word that you might use in your own language is very important, and it can take away the word care. I think that I wanted to share this because otherwise we are trapped within language. And I think that precisely one of the challenges that I see associated with feminist political ecology is naming differently. It's the possibility to name in a different way.
I think care is not the sweet, pink, good feeling thing, but it's complicated, usually hierarchical relationship, which involves all sort of ideas and actions and practices.
Assuming that A, care is positive, B, that it's something we can and ought to do for each other. It's almost sort of the expectation around it that hasn't felt caring to me. I still find care really problematic. I just think it has too much baggage. So maybe we can take a word from one of these other languages wherein it embodies something a bit bigger or different, or I don't know, more emancipatory than it does in English, and sort of, you know, brand it as something that stands for something we believe in.
I don't see care only as emancipatory. And that is why I always feel like we need to think it with other words, with other practices, with other extremely embodied positionalities.
We, you know, embrace vulnerability from the side of the social reproduction, but also as a metaphor, you know, also vulnerability as society, vulnerability as socio-natural systems, like that even talks to the discourses about how, you know, the power of science, or all these like eco-modernist thinking about, okay, no, you know, we have the solution, we will find it, we just need more of this kind of more technology or whatever. I think embracing vulnerability in our thinking as well, that we don't know everything, we'll never know everything. So I think for me, the working together with the concept or the word or the meaning of vulnerability alongside care is helpful to when I'm thinking, how do I do feminist political ecology?